Just another brother with another humble question. Just another brother with another humble question.
Welcome to another episode of A Brother with Questions. Man, it's been a minute. It's been a minute since I recorded one of these episodes. And I'm back. I'm back, man. Went through some stuff, went through a transition just personally in terms of where I wanted to go with this program and what did I want to speak on. And recently, just out of nowhere, some people just started encouraging me again to start speaking in spite of what people might have to say. And so, for those reasons and others, man, I'm back, man. B Period is in the building. A Brother with Questions is back. I hope y'all ready to check us out, listen, and like, subscribe, share too, man. Cause this first one, and everything going on right now, this first one's about to be a doozy. But we're gonna dive right on in, man. And this is introducing the some, reintroducing the others. B Period is back, and we're gonna dive right in. So today's topic, man, obviously there's been a lot of chat on the internet, in the news, everywhere, about the passing of Charlie Kirk, and like many people, I've been trying to really ponder and understand my thoughts. Not so much about Charlie Kirk. I think I'm okay with where I feel, and how I feel about Charlie Kirk. The thing that's been perplexing me is the response and the vitriol, and by that I mean just the utter disdain that I see on the internet. Mainly from, I ain't even gonna say mainly from black people. I had to say mainly from black people if I'm only paying attention to my personal connections on Facebook. But in general, from even the general public, about his passing. And there's this question that I've been having conversations with that I'm gonna share this evening. And the question is, how do we define racism in 2025? That's my question that I've just been pondering for like three days. I've been watching everything that everybody's been saying, you know, and obviously there's multiple people, there's, you know, all kinds of people on both sides of the aisle here about Charlie Kirk. But the question I just keep asking myself, and I've been talking about, is how do we define racism in 2025? And so as I ponder this, right, there's especially a lot of folk, again, if I just focus on my timeline, there's a lot of folk that look like me that are convinced that he was a racist. And others, right? There's a lot of people of other races as well that are convinced that he was a racist. And for me personally, you know, the reason why I asked that question is because, in my own personal opinion, when you define a racist is not only someone who has, let's say, vitriol in terms of the words that they speak, but they have vitriol in terms of the actions that they have as well. And I'm not saying that Charlie Kirk hasn't said something that, depending on what you believe, you might think is a little sideways for your belief. Certainly, right? You know, if you go back through the thousands, maybe even millions of hours of content or speeches or conversations that he's had, I'm sure you can find something that you probably disagree with. But the question I'm asking is, when you're just talking about conversation, does the conversation of having a different opinion than you, having a different way to describe something than you, mean you're a racist? And so obviously there's a lot of people that think that and think that he was. But just as I would almost argue, just as many people that thought he was a racist, there's as many people that just genuinely loved him and would be appalled to the idea that anyone thought he was a racist. And this is not even coming from some difference from whites or whatever. I'm talking about blacks who will argue you down that this man is just not a racist. Blacks who have had personal interactions with him, who've had long-term friendships with him, that would vehemently disagree with anyone that would call him a racist. And so as I ponder that idea, because I didn't know the man. All I know of the man is what I saw on the internet. I saw his conversations. That's all I know. And so for me, when I'm listening to this black person, whether it's Officer Tatum, whether it's Candace Owens, or there's others, countless others, but those are two of the most prominent names that come to mind. And I listen to their own personal interactions with the man. And I go, I don't know him. They obviously know him way better than I do. So if they're telling me, and I get they're black conservative, and so there's a lot of black people that go, you really can't trust no black conservative. Miss me with all that. I'm listening to a person who has a personal relationship with a man and is telling me their own personal opinions and thoughts. And for me, I have to go, I don't know. Because, again, when I ask my question, how do we define racism? A racist is not just a word. It's also an action. And I just can't fathom how anyone who would have deep relationships with black people, maybe not all of us, but there are some of us, can truly be simply defined by a clip when I have a genuine relationship telling me something completely different. And so, again, it's not about what I think. Because honestly, I don't know what to think about this man. I just know how to look at how other people view him. That's all I know. And then when I think about, going a step further, intentions. As a man who lives his life, or is trying to live his life, to the best of my ability, according to what God would have me do. When I listen to him speak, Charlie Kirk, I'm talking about, at least that is what he professes that he's trying to do. And so, as in anybody, you're never going to do it right. I don't care how much you try, you're never going to do it perfect. And so you're going to make mistakes. And so when you talk as much as he does, when you have as many conversations with people as he does, I imagine he's going to get it wrong sometimes. But does that one time, that 2 times, that 5 times, that 7 times, that 9 times, that 20 times that he got it wrong, does that define his entire life? Or does that define the mistake he made in that moment? It's just a question I'm asking myself when I think about the idea. And people tell me, how could you defend him? Which I don't even know if I'm defending him. I'm really just trying to get an understanding, to be honest with you. But when I look at him in terms of the Christian view, if you will, am I defined solely on the mistakes I make? Or am I defined for the ways that I tried to correct those mistakes? Am I defined solely on somebody else's opinion of me? Or am I defined by the relationship that I have with my Lord and Savior? And because I don't know honestly, just like I don't know anybody's relationship with God. I can't find myself. I find it hard to simply condemn him and write him off for what he says he was, for what he professes to be, simply because there's there's some of us that just vehemently disagree with him. And then I went further with that. And so in these conversations that I've been having, and they've been telling me, well, you got to understand, when a person says this, how could you not think they're racist? And I said, cool. I said, you know what? I'm going to concede in this conversation that maybe he was. But then I said, here's my other dilemma, though. I know black people, bro. I've been black all my whole life, right? 40-some years I've been black. I've heard black people talk about white people like a dog. I don't see them defining themselves as racist, though. And so I'm going, let me get this straight. How is it that we, or some of us, can look at the other side and have our own negative opinions about them without even necessarily knowing them? Because, today on TV, you can call anybody associated with MAGA a racist, and everybody's like, well, I can't really say it ain't true. They won't even push back on you no more. On mainstream TV, I know there's one or two channels that will, but I'm just saying. The overall, we'll just let it ride without any pushback. And so, if it's the speech that makes you racist, not the actions, then how many more racists are there on both sides of the aisle? And then how do we determine which side is more righteous? Which side is right? Because if we're all racist, which is one of the conversations I had, literally they were like, well, yeah, the black people who talk negatively about white people, they're racist too. And I said, okay, well then if I can see that they're racist, and then we can see that he was racist, and anybody that likes him is racist, quote unquote, well then what, are we all just racist in this world? Like, this is where my mind has been. And then if we're all racist, then what are we doing in society today? How do we get beyond to a place where we can come together, have conversations, and find a way? Because we're all living in this society. Nobody's going anywhere. So if every time we have a conversation, if every time I say something slightly different than how you would like I to say it, I'm a racist, how do we have a conversation with each other to get beyond where we don't see eye to eye? And that's just been bothering me about this whole situation, because we all seem to be so locked into our own sides that we can't even see beyond or see somebody else's opinion to even understand why they might feel different. And so I began to ask myself, I said, when in society, when in my lifetime, in my 40-some years, have we felt, or being this, or at least from my personal opinion, I'm just talking about me, have I seen that this disconnect exists? And I've been on this for, like I said, I've been here for a few days. I've had conversations with multiple people. And it hit me today. I say the last time I can remember this kind of disconnect was George Floyd. And the disconnect flipped a little bit. Because when you're talking about the disconnect there, you had a black people who saw beyond where George Floyd was, right? Because I mean, on that day, the initial thing that happened, right, was the fact that he submitted a counterfeit bill, right? So, for all intents and purposes, he committed I don't know if that's a misdemeanor or what that is, but right, he broke the law in some way. And then because he broke the law, apparently he had drugs on him. So when he knew they were calling the police, or when the police showed up, I can't remember the exact order of the steps here, but at some point the police were called. He saw police, knew the police were coming, whatever the case may be, and then he swallowed an absorbent amount of drugs. And so as a result, during the incident, he was probably high out of his mind. And so, of course, because of that, we know what happened. But when it was over, especially black people, we saw beyond the flaws of that moment. And we saw what we believe to be a good man when not on drugs, I guess you could say. And all we could see was the man and not what the man may have done in that moment or in his past that might have made him seem shady, if you will. And so when I look at today, it feels similar. Because you have ultimately two sides. You have one group of people who look at this man for the intentions of his heart. Not necessarily what he said, but the intentions of his heart and the conversations that he had. The fact that he professed to lead with the Christian mindset, right? Whether you agree with his theology, right? His theology is theology, and there's a lot of different theologies. Even in the black church world, there's a lot of theologies that people may disagree with. But he said his heart was in the right place, right? He said his heart was, I'm leading with what I believe the Bible is saying about society. And so people today are looking at his heart, his intention, and looking at him as a good man who lost his life. And then there's another side that looks at his words and condemns him. In a similar way, I think we saw the same thing with George Floyd. We saw a group of people who looked beyond where he was in that moment. A drug-induced, paranoid individual, not in his right mind, I would say. Because how could you be when you're hopped up on drugs? But we look beyond where he was in that moment and whatever crimes he may have committed in the past. And we saw the individual, some of us, and we focused on that and said we can't do that to an individual. And then there were others of us that saw who he was. Because no matter where you slice it, right, he was high on drugs in that moment, and by definition, probably not in his right mind. And they saw that person and made their opinions known. But because of those individuals who saw beyond where he was, right, they sainted him almost. And I know they didn't literally saint him, but the man has statues across this country, and more than one statue. And that right there alone, come on now. It took Martin Luther King 50 years to get a statue. This man got one within 2. So I'm just saying. And there were both sides there too. And so in this moment, when I watch what's happening with Charlie Kirk, I feel like it's a similar disconnect. And so that ultimately, the truth lies somewhere in the middle and ultimately can only be decided by one person. God. And so when I judge this situation, simply ask, back to my original question, how do we define racism? Because if it's solely on words and it has nothing to do with action, then there's a lot of us that got a problem. Because in our own homes, when the door is closed and we're amongst our group, our friendly cohort, our family, there's a lot of us whose words, if they heard what we said, there's somebody that would think, you? That's how you think? And so, yes, his was in the public square, but I don't think it makes any difference. Because as they told me when I asked this question, and it wasn't me that said it, it was them, the people I had conversations with. If he's racist, then there's a lot of us that look like me that are racist too. And so as we continue to process this situation about who the man was and ponder, because there's also been this conversation about what they're saying in white churches versus black churches. I look at this as a way that is meant to divide us when we really should be trying to find a way to get it. Because the one thing I truly believe, without a doubt in my heart, every church in America, every Christian church in America, I believe there's a common ground that we can find. That common ground is Jesus. And the one thing I feel like Jesus is saying to us right now is this is not the moment to separate. This is the moment to unite. This is the moment that if you got a problem with your brother, not all of us have a person we can reach out to personally, but a lot of us that are talking do. So have the conversation and put your emotions to the side when you do. Because when we have a conversation, man, which is honestly, for everything I can say about Charlie Kirk is he wanted to have conversation. Why else would you show up at college campuses across the country and thousands of people? If we can at least go back to the foundation of what he wanted, talk to each other. We don't have to walk out the conversation changed minds, but we should be able to walk out of the conversation brothers. And this may not work for everybody, because maybe you don't hold, or you don't believe that Jesus was brought here to be uniting, that he came to the earth to bring us together. Maybe that's not your belief. So if that's not your belief, maybe I'm not talking to you. But I am talking to everybody who holds Jesus in their heart, like I do. And I just can't believe, because I don't know that man's story, but I can't believe if Jesus were here today, he would stand across the aisle and just yell. I believe he would walk across the aisle, extend his hand and say, brother, let's talk. And let's see where we can find each other again. Because if we're going to be the Christian nation that we say we are, then Christians can't be fighting. Because it's not going to get us anywhere. It's going to keep us separated. And it's going to allow the enemy creep in and make whatever changes he so desires. And one day, Christians are going to wake up and not realize the world that we are in. So, I'm going to close again with my question. How do we define racism in 2025? Because it has to be deeper than what we say. Because we're all guilty of not saying the right thing. And on that note, I'm B. Period. And I'm back, y'all. I'm out.
Yeah.